Most people never check if their message comes across, unless, of course, the other party gets upset. Now, my question to you is, have you ever checked if your message came across, if it resonated? And if you didn't, why didn't you? Today we are going to talk about 3 ways to see if your message has come across. And I want you to get pen and paper, because we are going to look at this from various perspectives, specifically from various roles. And depending on which side of the table you are sitting, it might be quite differently. So let me start with a story. I was sitting across a panel. I felt judged. It was a panel of physicians, doctors, the medical people, and I was upset. What had happened? I had been asked how I was doing, and I said, I'm doing good. And it was the biggest mistake of my life. So yes, nowadays, if you ask me how I'm doing, my first answer will be mentally, I'm doing good. Unless, of course, I'm not. The result was nothing happened. The result was no, 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 no. The result was I'm not going to do any surgery, because the initial doctor thought I was doing good. It wasn't until I kept coming back that he realized something was going on. And then I was sitting across that panel. It felt awkward. It felt like it wanted to make me really small, because I felt judged. I didn't feel heard. And I was furious. They came up with all these things, and all I could think and feel was, they are not getting me. Fast forward, 3.5 years later, close to 4, I'm sitting across the desk. And this lady is listening. And she explains something to me. She explains that what I have in mind is not optional. She says she understands it, but that we need to do things differently. And she explains how. In order to get to that conclusion, she has done multiple exams, as in MRIs, for instance. And I actually have a friend on the phone who knows how to read those MRIs. She explains what she feels is off. And then, of course, we have all the pictures with markers. This doctor understands. Her name is Bella, and I'll be forever grateful. What she did was not just listen. What she did was explain and see if I was okay with what she suggested. And that worked for me. Now, in case you are wondering what is she talking about, those who have seen me live, they know, and I mean in person, that I occasionally walk with braces and crutches. But what I'm talking about is the moment that I couldn't stand on 2 feet anymore because I had problems with my ankle. The first round was going to a doctor and asking for support. I explained what I felt, and because this was so not normal, he couldn't comprehend what was going on my end. He just didn't believe it. I had to come back over and over and over again before he realized that there was something going on and that it didn't just disappear. I think all in all, it took me over half a year before he finally started to believe that what I said was true. And then he did a certain exam and realized, oh, yes, she is right. But then the next hurdle was there. And I'm not talking about the panel. I was talking about what he wanted to do. Because I could sort of explain what was going on. And I also knew more than what I explained. So there were basically two problems. And the first one, he understood. And after 10 times saying no, he finally agreed to do surgery, which was stitching up the ligament. But the second ask from me was, there's a bone on the loose, a little tiny bone. Can't you remove it? That was a big no. And if we go to Bella, the other doctor, and mind you, I had been talking to so many people in between the first one and her, including the one who had trained her and who had been looking at me like, are you nuts or something? What are you even doing here? How did you get in? Because apparently he was the one who was always treating his patients in Spain. Apart from that, I had made a judgment error. Well, let's put it this way. I was correct with that the bone was on the loose. What I didn't understand was, and that's where my assumption was incorrect, was that my tendons were attached to that bone instead of that bone was pressing on those tendons. And that's why all the doctors said, no, can't do, never done. Do you know what's going to happen? But the moment that she took the time to explain it to me, just like I had taken the time to explain it to her, and also finding a doctor who was specialized in all of this, which she is, that's when things changed. She did say, however, I cannot promise you that you can do everything you could before the incident. And she said, I cannot promise you that the pain will be fully gone. But that was okay. I knew what she said, but I also knew that if I didn't take the chance, that things would remain the same. What I needed to do was communicate with clarity. And nowadays I talk about voice, own, view. Voice it, view it, voice it, own it, view it. Voice it, speak up. That's what I did. And I did it with more and more clarity each time around. And yes, it cost me. But the good news is that nowadays I know what to do. I know how to prepare, and I support others in doing the same thing. Being prepared if you go to talk to whoever, a boss, a teacher, a doctor, you name it. Now, if we go to own, that's about being authentic, being the real you. So tell why this is important, why you need this, what it's doing with you. Don't play pretend, but be there. Let them see you, resonate with them. And last but not least, view it as in gain perspective. Be sure that you know that you have the right to be heard, seen, and understood, and also to be supported. And maybe not everything can be fixed, but the mere fact that someone actually is listening to you and supporting you makes all the difference. And remember, you are worth it. So, do you have pen and paper? Did anything pop up while I was talking to you about this? If not, then let's get going, because I'm going to talk showing you things from different perspectives. So we've already started with the doctor-patient role. And maybe that's not the first one that you would think of. I mean, my ideas were, the teacher and the student, the boss and the employee, equals as in your spouse, partners, and last but not least, patients and doctors. But since the best way for me to describe it starts with that moment sitting across that panel, I thought, let's start with doctors and patients. Now, this is a special kind of relationship. And why? Because depending on your age, you might look at them as an authority or not. But more importantly, you want something from them. And what I've noticed is that initially, if they don't believe you straight away, the reaction is, if you keep coming back, then something must be going on. So chances are that the first time around, you're not taken seriously. I'm not saying that's good, but I do know the reality. What I told you was, he asked me how I was doing, and I said I was doing fine. Of course, that is the politically correct answer, and it's true if you look at it from a state of mind. Even though I was in pain, I still was like, yeah, optimistic. I'm here. You're going to do something about it. But the moment that I realized that for him, it meant that I was doing okay, and he didn't have to do anything since I was doing okay, I realized I'd made a very huge mistake. Now, later, I concluded that he was one of those people who took things literally. Usually that happens when you're on the spectrum. And it's kind of hard to take away that first perception. So once they formed their opinion about you, then try to change that. And that's why it's so important to, the first time around, come to a conversation as in being open, but also make sure that you know what it is that you want to discuss. So always be prepared. Now, I don't know, maybe you have been in the situation that you were the doctor and not the patient. If you are, then please remember that a lot of people, they don't dare to speak up. And they will leave the room without actually having said what's important. One moment. I'm still dealing with a cold. So, and this is live. So it's not edited out. There you go. Okay, so the second one, and that's one that has been bugging me for decades, is the boss-employee relationship. Why that one? Because I've experienced so many times that things didn't work out the way they should. There's nothing like a tickle in the throat. Okay, so many times I got to work somewhere. It would be immensely nice. It would be more than that. I would be excited. And then at some point things would change. And that's because the person who was managing me changed. I've seen it all. When I started working, I got trained by this company called Pink Elephant. They made sure that I got coached by a senior employee who had been doing it for a longer period of time. And I could ask whatever I wanted to. That's nice. When I started working for a very specific company at the beginning of the new century, that manager, he basically said, you can work wherever you want, from home, you name the location, whatever time you want. But we actually didn't discuss what I really had to do. And I remember showing up at the location, the primary location where I was located, and I was like, and now, because he wasn't there. So, did he check with me if I could handle it? No, but fortunately for me, there were others. Now, I want you to think about the following. And if you are the one in charge, then please pay attention, because I'm going to ask you a few things. If you are in a conversation with someone, and by the way, if you are on the other side of the table, take notes too. If you are having a conversation with someone, say it's a one-on-one conversation, how is that conversation going? Are you just talking, asking, this is what needs to be done, and that's it? Or do you actually check if the other one has comprehended what you were talking about? Now, these things are especially difficult when you are a new manager or you are dealing with a new employee, because you don't know one another. And that's when we get to assumptions and judgment. So based on what you've done before, you probably have a certain way that you do certain things. But if you are new in the equation, then the question, of course, is, but how have things been going on here like forever? So say that you are the new manager or you're the new business owner. Then what are you actually asking? And what are you telling? And what are you assuming? Don't assume that things are the same as in the previous place that you were working at. Don't assume that the one sitting across from you is just like all the other people that you've managed before. There's a thing called autonomy, and there's also a thing like not knowing what to do. And there is a world of difference between autonomy and not knowing what to do. So, are you someone who goes into detail? Or are you someone who just says, this is what I want? I don't care how you do it, just go do it. That's the opposite side of it. So usually I refer to two phrases. One is go figure it out, and the other one is Google it. It seems to be the norm nowadays, and that has to do with impatience. And that actually leads me to, have you checked if your message has come across? Now, there are three ways for you to do this. The first one is start by scanning the face of the other one. And when I started with my story about the doctor and patient relationship, the thing is that when you're the patient, you want to know if your message has come across and landed with the physician, with the doctor. And well, that means that you might have to ask some questions, but it starts by, okay, so what are they doing? Is he or she actually listening? So scanning their face, scanning their posture. Are they interested? Are they annoyed? Are they really listening? So can you see the expression on their faces change? Then there is something which has to do with taking notes. Now, I do hope that when you go to a surgeon or whoever it is, that they actually take notes and that they listen to you and act on it. And then last but not least, there's the part where you can ask, what are you going to do? Now, say that you are the manager or you are the business owner, then it sort of is the opposite. So instead of the patient, you are the manager. And if you tell the other one what it is that you want, so that's your ask, then what do you do to see if your message gets across? Do you see if they are actually listening to you? So if someone is not looking at you, that doesn't mean that they're not listening. I've had a manager at some point, and she went berserk because I was doodling. And the reason I was doing so is because, well, first of all, I didn't like her. But second of all, for me, in order to listen, I needed something to distract me. So I would write down notes and I would be doodling too. And she just blew up and she grabbed the notebook out of my hands, said I had to listen. Well, that didn't work very well with me because what are you going to do when you cannot write down? So it was a way for me to vent my frustration at that moment. But it's a way that a lot of, especially neurodivergent people, actually channel their energy. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I made sure that I did listen, even though she didn't believe it. And well, let's put it this way, she was there temporarily, and then another one came. And by that time, the damage sort of had been done. And at some point, I left. Someone came up with another solution, and I was like, well, maybe that's the best one. And I went to a different company, not feeling understood at all and being highly frustrated. But we were talking about the managers. So the first one, we knew one another already for a long time. I had been the service manager, he had been the client, and at some point he said, well, if you ever need a job, then come work for us. So then he became the manager and I became the employee. We understood one another. He knew what he could expect from me, and it all worked out until he left. He was easy to talk to, so I could ask him questions. And, well, he, of course, knew me, and so he asked questions as well. So that was easy. But what do you do when you are the one in charge? So, do you observe someone? Do you look at their face? Are you looking at your screen while you are talking to the other person? And just to give you a different example, every now and then I'm very occupied with things, especially when I get to the cash register. Now, there's a reason why I prefer the self-scan, even though it's very impersonal. And the reason I do is I can take my time to put things in a specific order in a bag or 2 bags. So over here in Holland, we don't have people who put it in bags for us. No, we do it ourselves. And for the record, we pay for each bag. So it's assumed that you bring your own. Now, I do actually like to talk to people, and it does happen that I actually talk to the people, but I still don't look at them. And then at some point I realize, oh, I've been talking to this person and I have no clue what he or she looks like. And then I'm like, okay, let's look them in the eye. And when I do, it can be very confrontational because I can have a very intense look. But at the same time, it's like, hey, here I am, and we're making a connection. So getting back to, if you are behind the desk, what do you do? Do you observe someone? Do you look at that person? Do you actually make contact? Is there a connection? The next thing that you can do, especially if we're talking about this being an ask from you, is you can observe what the person is doing. Is the person taking notes? Or are they just, doing something? And if they're on their phone, what are they doing on their phone? I usually tell people I'm using my phone because I want to take notes. So if I get my iPad out, of course, then it shows. If I have pen and paper, which I usually don't have anymore, then you still see I'm taking notes. But when I'm doing it on my phone, especially having the privacy screen on there, you have no clue what I'm doing. And that's when we get to judgment. So if you see me on my phone, then what is the first thing that you're thinking? Are you thinking like, she's probably not paying attention. She might be playing a game. Or are you thinking, oh, that person is interested? And more importantly, what do you do to check it? So, first of all, are you actually interested in the person sitting across from you? Are you like, I'm the boss, I'm the manager, so of course they're going to do what I want them to do? Do you assume that they know because they have been in previous similar roles? How do you go about it? And especially if you're someone who is new in a certain position, then you might want to check that what you've done up till now also fits in the new position, in the new organization. Because if people are used to a lot of autonomy and you are going there and you are like the drill sergeant, then things might not work out very well. So what you want to do, and that's why I asked you, do you actually check if your message has come across? You want to do 3 things. You want the person to repeat back to you what it is that you have asked them to do. And you could really start really easily by maybe even before that one question saying, okay, so what do you think about this? How does it come across? It's open. It's giving room for interpretation. You immediately know if they've done it or not before, depending on the answer. But like I said, you can also ask them to repeat back what it is that you asked. That's something you usually do when you are not certain if someone has understood what you needed. But if someone is very experienced, they'll probably tell you straight away, okay, you want me to do this, that, and the other. And then hopefully they'll tell by themselves how they're going to go about it. But if we're talking about people who are socially, well, let's say awkward is not the nicest way to say it. But if they're not used to being social with others, whether it's because of COVID, working from home, they didn't have anyone to practice the skills with because, well, they were gaming with one another and looking at their screens. You know, that's when you really want to check. So ask them. So first of all, you want to hear in their words, not being repeated literally, what it is that you want from them. Because if you get it back literally, then do they actually get it, what it is that you want? But then again, especially when you have certain tiny little details which are very important, then you do want them to actually mention those too. So the second thing is, okay, so what do you think? How are you going to go about it? Do you have any ideas? And then you'll hear very quickly like, oh yeah, sure, I've always done this. And the way we go about it is like this, that, and the other. The way I go about it is, or you can see that someone is sort of searching like, well, I was thinking about, or I'm not sure. And if you then start with Google it, go figure it out, that might seem like a good solution. But the question, of course, is it? And that's why there's a third question too. And the third question is, okay, are you missing anything? Is there something you don't understand, something that you need? We're still talking about your ask, right? So at that moment, you can actually check and give them the space, especially when people are a little shy or not sure if they can ask something. Remember, you are in an authority position when you are the manager. So, you know, if you tell them, okay, you can ask, I just need to know, do you feel up for this? Do you know where to start? And what do you need? So, hence, is anything missing? Do they need anything else? And so you give them the chance to actually say, okay, well, this, that, and the other I got, but this I didn't. Now, I've been in multiple situations where I would have a conversation with someone and like 98% I would get, but that crucial 2% I didn't get. So I learned at some point that I had to rephrase my question. Instead of saying, can you explain this to me once again? And then having the people repeat this exact same thing. And then thinking that they actually understood what I was talking about. I had to tell them, okay, hang on. I'm following this, that, and the other. But this specific thing, what is it that you want from me? What is it that you need? Because I'm not getting what you are explaining. Now, this can be in any situation, whether I'm the one who is coaching, whether it is with a spouse, with a friend, whether it is for a client. It's about following something, but not entirely. And you can, of course, think, I'll ask when I'm amongst others who do know, or maybe you don't have that chance. So always be aware of how much time you have to actually ask on. So getting back to the doctor-patient relationship, it was very important to know what they were planning on doing and really understanding, like, well, did they get what I was trying to get across or didn't they? Now, one thing that I want to emphasize is assumptions and judgment. And I guess at some point we're all very likely to assume certain things. If we see someone on the phone, what is the person doing? And here's the thing. What do? Do you check what someone is doing? Because you might be surprised. So there are various ways that you can actually ask what's going on. So it could be like, hey, I see that you're busy with the phone. What's going on? Are you taking notes or anything? And then they will probably explain to you what's going on. And then you'll know if they were there paying attention or not. And it gives you the possibility to actually repeat certain things. Now, why is all of this important? Because the question, of course, is if you don't do this and people don't know the way you work, then how is this going to work out long term? And especially when we talk about business owners, you want your team to understand how the business works. But how can they know if you're not willing to explain? So in all cases, openness, honesty, respect, those things are key. Going to a very different situation, let's go to the kiddos and school. Are you a teacher? Or maybe you are a student going to college. But let's assume that you are the teacher. And the question becomes, again, do you actually listen to what the student or the kiddo is telling you? So as a teacher, you're used to teach, to train, to give instructions, and you assume that they're going to follow those instructions. But what if someone actually has different experiences? In order for a kid to follow your instructions, this is not just about authority. It's also about safety, and it's also about trust. And, well, this is when we get to those expressions. So remember what I said about look at their face. Are they looking at you or are they looking away? Do they have a posture that they're paying attention or not? And if you are asking them to repeat it back because you want to know if it's clear, how do they respond? And now it gets interesting, because what if they do not respond the way that you want them to? And they say, okay, if this happens, I'm going to do, and then they come up with a different answer than what you instructed them to do. Then what are you going to do? And I really want you to think about this. What are you going to do if you've got a student or a pupil who comes up with a very different answer. Are you curious? Or are you in that role of authority and you're not having it? And of course, you might say, I'm not having it, but how does that work out? So what you want to know is there a connection? Is there trust? Do you actually get an answer? So communication and that connection is so immensely important. Now say that you are the student. And yes, I'll be a student in half a year, circa, because I'm going to go back and do some master studies. And well, I've been used to going to school, becoming a therapist. And even when I had that first job over at Pink Elephant, training was normal. So I'm like, okay, let's go do this 2 years on a weekly basis. It's going to be tough, but I know why I'm doing it. So I'm also counting on being very excited. And I'm already doing research. I'm also familiar with what it is that I want to do because I've been doing it for over a decade. But now it feels like taking things to the next level. So if you're a student, and let's face it, when I was a student at the Academy of Arts, or even at elementary school, or at high school, there were plenty of times that I had no clue what to do. Now, the good news was when it came to high school, I usually did my homework already when the teachers were teaching. It was during certain tests that I would notice that I didn't do things the way I should have done it. And actually, it only showed up when I was in that class where we had all the exams to actually get our diplomas. And that's at some point when someone noticed, like, you're making things too complicated. Do it a little simpler. And it worked. I went straight from, well, I guess what was close to an F to an A minus. So that was, yeah, that felt good. But when I went to the Academy of Arts, I still didn't know how to approach teachers and how to ask certain things. I just didn't know. I had no clue how to figure it out. And I didn't know, actually, that I didn't know. I usually observed what they did. And then with the next assignment, I knew what I had to do. And usually I would be running behind a little bit. And they actually pointed it out. And still, I had no clue. So at the end of the year, the second year, I flunked. In the last week, they let me know that I would not go on to the next year. And I was distraught. So I was done. And apparently the communication that was going on was between the teacher and my mom, not between the teacher and me. I mean, I already had checked out. So I never returned to the Academy of Art. Nowadays, I would like to. There are a lot of things that I learned during those 2 years. So I don't regret having gone there. And especially because I also learned how difficult communication actually is. Now let's go to a totally different situation. Spouses. Ooh, that's a nice one, isn't it? Because if they are like your mom or your dad, and usually we pick out someone who we are familiar with, and at first it's like, oh, this is nice. Then at some point, those things that you where like, oh, this is nice, might actually start annoying you. And how do you communicate with one another? Because, well, we haven't learned to communicate very well now, have we? And that's when I wrote in the description, at least on Instagram, I mentioned we are so good at talking, but that doesn't mean that we're actually good at connecting with one another and actually having a conversation where we feel understood and we understand the other one. I think it probably changed a little bit because I asked AI to check if my grammar was okay, and he likes to do it a little bit punchier. And he is Brendan Burchard's AI, so Brendan AI. And I've noticed that I really, really need to pay attention to the details. So, just as a side note, if you really want to check when it comes to communication, if your message gets across, talk to an AI and see how they respond back, especially down the line. So, when it comes to partners, there's often emotion involved. So, also when we talk about parents and children, and especially the dynamic when you and your spouse have children, then, well, how's that going to work out? Because when it comes to children, often they are drawn to one of the two. Whether it's because they can get along better or they understand one another better, or because they know that they can get more done with one versus the other. And that's why it's so important to actually be on the same page and not have different perspectives. Well, the different perspectives are okay, as long as you have one way that you approach your children. So you want to be consistent. And again, you don't have to agree with one another, but at least be consistent. That's going to work out. But what if you do not agree? And what if actually it triggers something from back in the days? That's where things get hard. So I do say every now and then, get a notebook and write things down. So when you have some time and things didn't work out the way you wanted to, then write your thoughts down. And you get to ask what it is that you need or want from them, or what you didn't understand. Why did someone do certain things the way they did? And let them respond in that same notebook. So that way, the emotions aren't there, at least not on two sides straight away. Usually, it gives you the time to really think things through when you are writing it down. So it's a way to open up communication without the initial emotions being present. Now, something similar, which I would assume might be easier, but it doesn't have to be, is when we're talking about business partners. So, how did you meet the other person? Is it a long-time friend? Is it someone you trusted? Is it someone you asked to help you out? What's happening next? What if you have a certain vision and the other one has a totally different vision? So it's kind of interesting to see, like, how are you going to work together? Is there certain areas where you're good at and the other one is good at, but they complement one another? How are you going to go about it? And when it comes to agreements, write things down and talk things through, so you can really figure out who is the one who's best equipped, but use one another, use to brainstorm with one another. So when you see the strong things that the other one has, the unique skills, and maybe you have similar skills, then use it to really, go back and forth. What is it that you want to do and what's going to work out best? Now, all in all, I've given you 3 ways to look at things to see if your message got across. With a big red flag, well, I'm not certain if I should call it a red flag, but it can become a red flag. So make sure that you don't just assume things, don't judge people, but ask. Please ask before you already have told yourself, oh, this is the way that it has to be. Because, well, the other people that I've met so far, they did the exact same thing. So why would this be different? You want to know why someone is doing something or not doing something. So if you have asked, then ask them to reflect back. And like I said, if they say it literally, you might want to ask them, because it doesn't say anything when they say it literally back. That's basically saying what the other one wants to hear. So make sure that you ask them, okay, so what are you going to do? What's your follow-up? That will give you some sense, some direction, some perspective, and then ask them if there's something else that they need from you. And that way you can get a better idea of if there's something that they need when it comes to support. Now, why is this so important? Because I've noticed that in numerous organizations, that communication is not working out very well. Now, for those who have been following me, I'm not only about giving people perspective back. I'm not just about having you learn to speak up, but this is also about getting a better understanding about those who are gifted, those who are neurodivergent. So neurodivergent usually refers to their brains being wired differently. So it could be people on the spectrum with ADHD, but usually it's gifted people. And since they might take the time before they answer, because they have to figure out, okay, am I going to give the what's expected from me answer, like, oh yeah, I'm doing fine? Or are they going to give you an answer that you didn't expect? But it might take them a little while, because it's about from which perspective do you see things. And I still remember going to the training from Tony Robbins, I think it was Business Mastery, and I asked him something, and then he asked me something in return. And I really had to think about that for a moment, like, okay, what he's asking me, could I do that? So he actually pointed it out to the crowd that I needed that time to process what was going on. So the mere fact that I didn't answer straight away actually showed him that I was considering what he was saying. And what I've noticed is, especially when I'm talking to the AI, but also to others, is when I don't respond immediately, depending on what's going on. So when we are talking on the phone, you don't see one another's face, unless, of course, you're FaceTiming or something along those lines. So I usually wait when there's a pause. And then when nothing happens, then I might say, are we waiting for one another? But When I'm pausing myself because I'm thinking about things, I usually will say, I'm thinking about the answer. So I'm already giving a clarification about why I'm pausing for the time that I'm actually pausing. Why am I talking specifically about the gifted ones and the neurodivergent ones? Well, it's not like communication is easy enough the way it is. We already know it's hard, especially when it comes to experiences. If you've had experiences which didn't work out, you didn't trust the teachers, you were being bullied, you were not understood, you never learned how to speak up, then, well, if you don't feel safe, you're not going to open up. And when it comes to gifted, and I'm going to say children in this case, that trust or lack of trust can start really early on, especially if you are someone who is impatient, want to teach something in an entire class of 30 people, 30 children, and you don't want them to have the time. Now, remember that I was talking about Tony Robbins. Well, the training was like 6 days, and we were with thousands of people, and he let me think. The camera was pointed at me, and he let me think about it. There was no rush. He wanted to get something across. And that's the difference between what often happens at school. Now, if you don't have the time in class, then maybe you can find a different moment. So get back to the student and say, okay, I'll get back to you on this one. So I'm going to move on for a moment. And when you're ready, then let me know. So that way, you don't dismiss the other one, but you actually give the other one the chance to come up with that answer. Now, for those who know, well, actually, I just told you I'm going to do master studies. And a couple of weeks ago, I said I'm going to be the go-to expert for the gifted, for the neurodivergent people out there. A lot of things have happened since I said so. So, for instance, I registered at that school. So it's called a university. And I still have to apply, but it starts with the registration and then I'm getting an assignment. I also applied for a grant and I was supposed to talk to them this week, but you can hear I'm still dealing with a cold. So I said, I'm not going to come over. We can do Teams or Zoom meeting. And we are going to do that on Monday. And so I have the chance actually to really do some extra research. And the reason I want to do this is because when we start at school and we see those little ones who are already dealing with not being able to trust the teachers, not being understood, being skipped when it comes to answers, it has its impact on the children. And like I said, when I was in high school, I already did my homework during class. I would listen and, already be ahead of things. So my mom thought that I wasn't disciplined. Well, I'm not going to say that I'm that disciplined, but my brother, when he would come home, he would do his homework first and then play with others. I had already done my homework, so usually there wasn't much left to do. So I would go out and talk to my friends. Well, actually, talking to my friends consisted of going to the meetup place where we would be, and then I would sit on the stairs and just observe and watch everything that was going on, because I was absolutely an introvert. I didn't know how to express myself. So, in order to get everything done, I'm also going to San Diego. And when I'm there, will go to the University of San Diego, so UCSD. And they are specialized in working with those who are gifted. And when I was talking earlier about that grand impact, that has to do with setting up a park of pride, power, and perspective. And not just one, but it's going to start here if everything is going according to plan. And pride is because they're proud of themselves. Power is because they feel empowered, and perspective is because they believe in themselves again. And what my goal is to create a society where it's more inclusive. And because the young ones, especially when they are not challenged, they do not learn to learn, then at some point later in life, they're going to run into a number of walls because they didn't know how to ask, they didn't learn to learn. And when it comes to internship, that's getting very hard. Now, if you are one of those people who runs into those communication challenges with your team, you cannot seem to understand why they don't get you. You've already decided that they must be lazy or they don't know how to figure out things. And like I said, if you use quite often, go Google it or go figure it out yourself, then please listen to this recording again, to this live, because I did give you some pointers on why not to do so and how to do things differently. But if you are running into it and you could use some people to brainstorm with, like-minded people, peers, and you would like to make changes on the spot, then reach out to me, because when we're in San Diego, then during these 5 days over there, it's not just about visiting the university over there, but it's also about applying micro changes by having micro meetings. And well, if you are like, oh, this is cool, I really like that, and you would like to continue this on, then you would basically be getting coaching from me during the entire year. And you would be part of the founders group, the Steam Power Collective founders group. So for short, I call it Steam Power Founders. So if you are someone who recognizes the importance of changing how we communicate, especially with the young ones, who sees generational gaps or also gaps in how people respond. And then we talk about neurodiversity. Then please reach out to me, because my goal is, like I said, to make the world a more inclusive place. Now, the world is, of course, big, but by doing the trips, the experiences locally, so second week of March, San Diego, Monday to Friday, so that's the 9th till the 13th. And you are like, yeah, that's, we need to change this, because I know those people, those are my children. Or I went through that same situation and you want to partner up, then please reach out to me too. And you'll be at the forefront of changing society. And if this park is going to work out, then, because this is going to be a prototype, then the goal is to have several of these parks all over the world. And the parks are meant to help the gifted out there to learn, to ask things, and patience is key here. And I also want to create a park where, especially for the ones who are tactile, as in they want to feel certain things in order to understand certain things, they want to experiment on things, discover things. It's going to be, well, there are going to be a lot of things in there which are very suitable, especially for those children. So it would also be a place where the gifted could drop by, or maybe the entire class could drop by to figure things out. And the goal is also to work closely with students from colleges and universities to see what can be done nowadays. And well, I see a lot of collaboration, well, possibilities for collaboration, but like I said, it would be nice if it would be a global thing. So if you are interested, or if you know someone who would love to go to San Diego, it's a beautiful place to be, but especially could use some guidance when it comes to working with other people, or who is like, oh, I totally believe in your cause, let's go do it together, then please reach out to me. Send me a message. I'll let you know in the description what you can do. You can always leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're looking at this somewhere else. It's always also easy to actually go either to LinkedIn or to go to Messenger. So just find on Instagram Lady Lexi Speaks Up. I think it's the same thing on Facebook too, even though it says Lady Lexi. And reach out to me. And for now, I am very interested in knowing what you got out of this. So it was sort of like a mini workshop. And what are you going to apply, and how is it working for you? Let me know, and I'll see you again next week.